Okay,
Can I do
it's recording.
Hello, Dr. Wiggins. Welcome to our first discussion for ELL 431. I'm Emma Miller.
Elisa Manson.
Molly Linnell.
Mackenzie Bradburn.
And
So we just wanted to start off by talking about chapter 1 of
Freeman and Freeman.
Freeman and Freeman. And so we each took someone from the chapter 1 and we were asked to summarize them, connect it, and think of any questions that were raised from the student. And so I'll start us off talking about the students that I did. I listened to Eugenia. She was born in an apartment because her mom was undocumented and she didn't want to have to go to the hospital and worry about being caught and then being sent away. And so sometimes she would have to leave Eugenia and her siblings with her relatives in Mexico. And neither of her parents spoke English and didn't have much education, so that was really hard on her, especially when she came to the U.S. when she started school, because she didn't have the support of people around her. And her teacher definitely wanted to include her and gave her a lot of language support and safe classroom environment, and so that was a really positive side of that. But the negative thing is that her parents couldn't really help her continue on in her education as she grew up and stuff, because they didn't know English. So I think that connects. And I had a question, what are some ways to actually help the parents feel more connected to the schools, as well as understand and learn English? Because I feel like it'd be important to get the parents involved more.
that reminds me of programs like Wolf Night that are part of the Bellingham School District and surrounding
Wolf
areas.
Night?
Molly, what school is it at?
It's at Washington Elementary. It's on Thursday nights, and it started a few years ago. Dr. Marilyn Chu, who's an early childhood, our faculty advisor, she we just took a class last quarter about family engagement, so I thought your question was really interesting, because studies have shown that the more parents are engaged, then the more successful a child is, and then especially in this situation, for them to, what sounds like you're suggesting, learn English would be able to help her with school. Anyway, so the Wolfpack Night is just kind of a community gathering place, it seems like it's turned into, where instead of teacher-directed or faculty-directed meetings, talking at parents, there's, they start with a meal in the cafeteria. It's one night a week or one night a month, I forget.
One night a week.
And
free food, free
yeah.
dinner. And then there's different classes, and so parents can sign up to learn English, or they can sign up to teach their own classes. And it just gets them part of the school and not just involved, but also engaged.
That's really cool.
because there's academic classes where the parents could learn English, or Club de Lectura, where they could have high school students or college students reading in Spanish to children. But then there's also dance classes and bead making, necklace classes.
Oh.
So it's really it's academic, but it's also
Just
community. Yeah.
Where I live in North Bend, the place I work, it's called Encompass, and I would take care of the kids while parents would get either schooling on English, or helping read contracts of things that they have to sign, or help them understanding all the different things that they have to do within the community, because we have a really big population of Hispanic people, and so that was really cool, because I would hang out with their kids, and their kids were super bilingual and knew everything, but then the parents could get that support, and so that made me think of these students too. Because
Is it a nonprofit or
Yeah.
a business?
It's a nonprofit.
That's a really cool thing, because I hate sending forms home to parents in
Mhm.
English, or just anybody signing something in their second language.
Yeah.
Just I think it makes a legal document probably void if if it's not in your
They
first
don't know,
language.
yeah.
Yeah.
So it was cool because they like read it all through to them, and then they like would help them like, I don't know, like understand what is actually going on with all of the stuff. And yeah.
Awesome.
Another thing that about I think it might be Eugenia about her situation was that at first her parents didn't want the teacher to be teaching her in English or in Spanish. They're like, no, she needs to learn English. But then the teacher, Candida, which I think means yeast. She had to convince them that primary language learning is really important.
Yeah,
I thought
was
that was
this the teacher that was Puerto Rican?
Mm-hmm.
And so in
Think
the,
so.
I read this one too, and in the discussion of it, it was like she has much in common with her students being able to speak Spanish, but at the same time, there's differences being Puerto Rican versus Mexican.
And she was like Puerto Rican from New York,
Yeah.
and these were like they're Mexican from California, which similar in being a minority and linguistically, but yeah.
The next person that we talked about, or that I read about, was Farah, and they moved from Iraq to Texas when she was about 9 years old, and her parents were like really high class, or for Iraq, and she went to a private school and got a lot of higher education that way. And so when she came to the US, she was like really close to grade level, and it was an easier transition, but it was still pretty hard. And it said that her 4th grade teacher was really nice, but didn't know exactly how to support her learning because she spoke Arabic and not like Spanish or one of the other like more usual languages that you have to support in a classroom. And so her teacher had a hard time doing that, so she would always be called out to meet with a specialist, and she felt like she couldn't really get involved in like what the other students were doing, and that was really hard for her. And it also mentioned that she had a lot of nightmares because of all the violence that happened in Iraq, and that would just be really sad to like, that just like hindered her from learning, and she was like always afraid of those things. And her parents had like financial issues because they couldn't really get jobs in the US, even though they had really good jobs before, because they couldn't speak as fluent English. And so
I think that was a common thread through a lot of these students, was like their parents not being able to get jobs at the level that they should have been able to. I think through a few of them, I don't remember which kids it was.
Well, I think
but
Farah's parents were just underemployed because her mom was a doctor and her dad was a translator in Iraq, and now he's a translator here, but for a lower level. And then the mom is like a part-time caseworker. I think
so compared to what they were doing,
exactly,
it was like terrible.
What I thought was really interesting, and I think this is a problem for me, and it's the question that you brought up too, is that at one point she said in her anecdote was that she felt she was learning more Spanish than English, and I know we're coming from Spanish speaking backgrounds, and yeah, like you said, how do you support a student who speaks Arabic when
when the majority speak like Spanish and you're trying to help them, like
I think you have to try to really engage in total communication and like speak with pictures and with your emotions, and be really clear about what directions you're giving to like set them up in an environment where they can learn English.
just like a lot of supports of like, grab this chart, like look at these pictures, or like, I don't know, I think like, I feel like someone said like not document heavy, but print heavy or something, where you're like showing
print
them a
like
lot
rich.
Yeah.
visual aids and
But that would be difficult.
and I think she had even had English instruction in Iraq.
I don't know. One of the kids I was reading about was Moni, and this kid was from Thailand and came here in kindergarten. And she got put in like a kindergarten class, and she didn't talk a lot, and so the teacher thought that like she wasn't understanding things or and like I don't know if she was completely understanding it, but so she was put in like a pre-first grade class, like an intermixed,
In between.
and it was like a bilingual, like it was kind of like one of those like students who are ELL learners go to, and the teacher like saw how smart she was, just that she didn't interact a lot with the other students and was a lot more quiet, and so the teacher would like write her letters and different things, and so they like communicated in that way, which I thought was super cool. But she was like, it's just scary to think like where she's going next, because some teachers might take her silence as like not understanding or like not being smart, and she's like, but she's super smart. And so like after like reading that, I was like, oh, that scares me, because if they're silent, how do you, you know, and so it's like learning how to communicate with all of those students. But
I personally
Yeah.
have been in that situation studying abroad, and I studied abroad in Panama in high school, where I had only taken a little bit of Spanish beforehand. And when you don't understand what they're saying, they do assume that you're dumb, usually, or like will talk down to you or just talk louder instead of more clearly. So understanding that a person has this whole other language trapped inside them that you just don't understand
yeah.
is important.
I like that you, I'm not sure if it was in the text or if you like kind of came up with this term, but you said that she had a silent phase. And I thought that was really poignant. You know, I mean, if you're thrown into a country where you don't know any of the language, you'd probably just sit back and take it in for a while too.
Yeah.
And she was fortunate that she had a teacher who noticed that she was probably taking things in, but
Yeah.
you know, appreciated the silent phase. And so yeah, I really like that you might think you're not getting through to them at first, and so not to give up on them just because they are letting things sink in for a while.
Right.
And I really like that she followed through, and I think this should, I think on probably like IEPs, it's probably a standard practice to do follow through to when you transition to the next teacher, but I think it should be for everyone where, I mean, just little notes about a student, and, you know, if she, you know, how she was able to say like, she really loves art and she's really quiet, but I'm pretty sure she's really, really smart.
Yeah.
You know, just so she was able to give that to the next teacher the heads up, so she
I don't know
didn't have
if
to
I
start over.
wrote about this, but she actually did her disposition on this student, and so she like took a year off, I think, after the year that she taught Moni, and so she went and she actually worked with her like once in a while.
Oh, that's right.
And so like they worked like one-on-one together sometimes, and so she was like able to be like, no, she really is smart, you know, like that kind of stuff, so that was cool.
Yeah, that's really fortunate that she got to see her growth.
Yeah,
Yeah.
not everyone gets that, but
Not a one-on-one attention.
yeah.
I think that there's more ways to also, like, to your question, to assess students than just like writing it down. Like they could like speak it or something, and like you might have to call in someone to help you with that. But I think that like if someone speaks a test or like something, that's a really good way to assess their understanding.
Yeah. How much time should we
Should
spend
we
on
move
each
on
of
to a
these?
second?
Yeah, I feel like we should.
Yeah, how much time have we been going?
I forgot to start the timer.
Oh,
I don't know.
That's okay.
I think we've probably been going about 10 minutes, so maybe we should go to the next section of the different types of ELLs.
Yeah.
Let's see, Emma, should we go the opposite way, and Emma maybe 13 minutes, and maybe talk about the potential long-term English?
Yes, okay. So potential long-term English learners are students who come into the U.S. knowing no English as their first language. And these tend to be younger when entering the school system, and they enter a school system that doesn't really provide them support in their home language. And so with this really underdeveloped home language where they might not be literate or be able to read, then they have a hard time learning how to read and write in English. Because even if a book was translated for them into their home language, they wouldn't be able to read it. So they struggle in class. Sometimes teachers think they're troublemakers or just don't talk, like Moni. Yeah.
I like that you said at the your very last sentence was she can't read or write at grade level, but she speaks conversational English well. Like I think it was like by the end of the year, and that we as teachers really need to be aware of the difference, you know. And just because she can speak social English doesn't mean that, or I don't know who I'm talking about, Alicia. I think. Oh, you know, you're talking about Alicia, not me. But yeah, so yeah, Alicia was able to speak conversational English, but that didn't mean that she, you know, academically was where a sixth grader should be, and it didn't mean that she needs less support. So,
Yeah.
I mean, with so many students, if we see like, oh, okay, this girl is speaking English well and has friends, then she doesn't need as much support. You know, we would have to make sure to look at the whole child.
Yeah.
And then I also did the newly arrived with adequate schooling section. Where are you
I did the newly arrived.
guys? You did that too? Okay. Wait, maybe I'm.
'Cause that was B.
I think you
Yeah, you're wrong.
did you mislabel one of yours?
No, I was just in the next section. Okay,
Oh,
here we go.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Okay. Okay. Oh
I'm
well, so
on
we
it.
just talked about the
Yeah, potential long-term English language learner.
Yeah.
And then a long-term English language learner is someone who's been in the United States for 7 or more years,
oh, okay, that's
but
what
are
I was
still
talking about.
struggling.
Gotcha.
Got
Cool.
it. Yeah, because they're U.S. born, they're often overlooked.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think like watching the videos that we had to watch of the students who like can't get into college or can't like they have to pay out of state tuition
Could you imagine?
would be crazy, and like they couldn't get financial aid or anything because
Yeah.
they're like undocumented even though they've like were born here. Like
It's ridiculous.
it's so
Well, I
ridiculous.
think if you're born here,
or
I think
Or
their
when they were
parents had
doing it.
just had brought them in illegally when they were really young.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you're born here, you are a citizen.
Mhm.
So, but yeah, can you imagine paying without any financial aid or
And out of state tuition.
yeah, and out of state tuition? Well, Emma's like, yeah.
Financial aid though.
Oh, okay.
Like I have a scholarship.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so.
Yeah, and you would just have to be really, like that one girl in the video, just extra determined,
Yeah.
whereas other people don't have to be as determined,
Mhm.
which is, I think, such an issue of like white privilege and where people don't see the need for affirmative action
Mhm.
things because, I don't know, that's a whole different topic though. Do we want to talk about the other types? So I thought it was just that they split in the different,
There's so
split
many
up the
different-
different types of English language learners. Does somebody else want to talk about their?
I did newly arrived with adequate schooling, which was interesting because it's like students who have had like really good schooling outside of here and then come here and they don't know English very well, but they are still like they can like actually be ahead in certain subjects because of their different schooling that they've had, and a lot of them have had like family members who have lived in the U.S. And like they have like big communities here. I think it was the one thing that like stuck out to me was like the kids who don't have the support like of the family, because it was talking about a lot of like students who have support of the family, but then there's also the kids who like have a lot of really good schooling outside of here, but then they come here and then they're learning English, which is fine for them, but it's like the outside stuff that comes into their life more, so like the different things at home or like the struggles of like just like the basic needs. And so yeah, I don't know, so it wasn't necessarily that they needed like a ton of support for their like learning and schools, but more for like their like
Emotional
surroundings
and,
and
like,
emotional
social
support. Yeah.
Yeah, kind of like that contextual interaction model
Mhm.
with different factors.
I like the example of the 3 siblings that
Yeah.
came.
I really like
They're
that.
from El Salvador, right? So they all came having this really high level education from El Salvador and ended up being really successful.
Yeah, even though they went through like terrible things, like
Yeah, their
they saw
father
their
was
father
killed.
get shot and
Yeah.
stuff, and they still like, because they had the emotional support, they were able to succeed in school.
And I think what I took from their situation, even though they were, you know, political refugees and they'd seen their father assassinated, Emma, was this your section? Yeah, you said that, let's see, I can't find it, no, I highlighted it. They were like aware of their self-worth, you know, so
Yeah.
they were, you know, they were in a high class in El Salvador. I think I'm pretty sure they were, and so that's probably, I think, a big difference between a lot of other groups is that you know, they had an established sense of self-worth and value of education, and that they knew they could succeed. I mean, obviously, it's amazing that they all you know, did.
It was really interesting
Graduate
that they all
school
did
or-
like different things too, that they all like found their outlets in different places
And
and
they still did
I-
great, each of them. Yeah.
What?
They still all did really good.
yeah, and they all like, I thought I was waiting for like the one student who like, you know, it was like the three of them like,
Yeah, then it gets down to Patricia. It's like, but Patricia dropped out.
right, but they all like found different outlets and I just thought that was super cool to hear that like they all, I don't really know where that like pertains to this conversation, but just like it was
personality-wise-
cool that,
Personality-wise, they adjusted differently.
Yeah.
I think was interesting.
Yeah,
But
it
then
shows
they
that
still
even
thrived.
from the same background, a student might act a different way depending on just
Right.
their personal preference or who they are.
mhm.
Let's see. Mine was newly arrived with limited schooling. Let's see if I can find my section. I'm sure I talked about who was it?
You're doing
Osman, who was born in the refugee camp in. Oh, why can't I find any of my stuff?
One second, I've
I
got
can-
it,
I can
I've
find
got it.
everyone else's. Oh, okay, yeah. Here we go. Newly arrived with limited schooling, and somebody else. So yeah, Osman was the boy who, and his family was were refugees from Somalia, but then they were in the camp in Kenya. Which I was reading about today is the one that they were probably in has 500,000 people in it who have been living there for over 20 years because of the Somali-Kenya conflict. Because the students that were killed like a couple weeks ago, the 147 students were killed in Kenya by by like a Somalian terrorist group, and then the Kenyan government was like being reactionary, and they're like, well, maybe we should kick out all the Somalians from the refugee camp and send them back to Somalia, even though a lot of the people had never even been to Somalia who were in there. Anyway, so part of what I even wrote on here on my notes is that that we need to research the history of our students' home country. You know, like to know, I mean, not the difference between El Salvador and Mexico, but, you know, to know that those are completely different situations. And, you know, like if those kids were in my class, I'd probably wonder, what was going on
Like
in
what
El Salvador that they came here, and, you know, what was going on in Somalia, and what kind of experience did he have. And I think it was in your section that one of the teachers, or somebody referenced it, that a teacher gave the kids a survey to do of how much schooling have you been in, or what has your schooling been like, because we can't just assume that if somebody's 12 years old that they've been in a classroom before and has held a pen and paper, or just because somebody is from rural Mexico doesn't mean they can't read or write in Spanish. Unfortunately, they might not be able to, but they also might speak 3 languages.
Nice assumptions.
Something
Yeah.
that my mom, who's a teacher, a 3rd grade teacher, does is she meets with all of her students in her classroom before school starts, and she does like one-on-one, like even like she'll have the parents like come in and talk with her with the student, and then like the parents leave and she just works with like one-on-one just to see where they're at. And so that could be like a really good time that if you did that to like talk about like where are you, like why are you here? Or just like, what experiences have you had? Like, is this your first time in a classroom, or is this like, you know, is this like everyday life for you? Just I think is really important, which I had never thought about because where I'm from, like in North Bend, we don't have a lot of like diversity, and so you don't get very many like ELL students. But the ones that she has had that are ELL students, it's been really helpful to like understand like what role they're playing in their family and just like in general, and so that would be.
Yeah, I think it's really safe to like, or to not assume as a teacher that they are where they're supposed to be, and like they could have difficulties at home, and trying to understand those things to better understand like their learning process and the style that they need and the support that they need in their learning.
And I think there's also the balance between understanding their challenges and where they're coming from and still holding them to high expectations.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
That's
don't
gonna be
wanna give
hard.
up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think if you like see like, oh, you like struggle with this, like I'm still like gonna like believe in you, and like I still see you as like this person that can achieve these things, but there's like some things that just suck, and like, you know, you gotta know that. I don't know, I think that's so important to know about a student. You're not getting food in the morning, or you know, like you're having to translate everything for your parents, like that's gonna make a difference.
You have to take care of your younger siblings, and you should be doing your homework.
Yeah.
For my part in this section, I was talking about all of these different categories and like the kids that were talked about earlier and how they fit into them, and we kind of already discussed that stuff.
Okay.
Chapter 2.
Yeah, so is that, 3A, do you want to start with explaining Ogbu's theory?
Yes. So Ogbu's theory, well, when I pulled out a quote from it that helped me. It said that certain types of immigrants succeed in school at higher rates than other types of immigrants based on factors other than language or previous schooling. So like what we were talking about, like the support that they have outside of that, and there's different kinds of immigrants, like immigrant minorities or involuntary minorities, and it was interesting to learn that immigrant minorities like come to the U.S. and they're not really influenced by mainstream society, and they can differ between like their behavior between like at school behavior and at home behavior, and they're more involved in their culture, and they like have a really high value on education and things like that, and academic success. And when it comes to like involuntary minorities, they're just people who have been here for generations through like slave or like being slaves or something, and they tend to like try and go in the mainstream society, and they don't really care about the values of their culture or like the traditions as much, and they don't really experience academic success, and they're kind of just like don't seem to care as much in a way, and I think that was really interesting to understand. And they also act the same that they do in school as they do at home, and not really putting an emphasis on their cultural like diversity and making that an important part of their life.
I don't know if I agree with that at all.
I have a big problem with Ogbu. Like you said, that the involuntary minorities are, you know, like Mexican Americans who have lived here since before there was a United States, and just because the border changed, then they all of a sudden became a minority, and then, you know, Native Americans getting pushed off their land, and then people enslaved, and then you know,
So he's saying that
institutionally oppressed for hundreds of years.
all of those people are involuntary minorities, which is
That they've lived in the U.S. for many generations. I think that was kind of the main indicator for me.
Yeah.
is that they've lived in
The U.S. Yeah.
So like their parents or their parents' parents were slaves, so that's how they like came to the U.S.
So like African Americans,
Yeah.
Mexican Americans, Native Americans.
Okay.
I think.
Are three of the main groups. groups.
Yeah.
But it's people that have lived here and the dominant culture has oppressed their culture
Yeah.
for these many years. And what I understand Agbu to be saying, and the part I don't agree with, is that they don't care about their culture.
Yeah, I don't agree with that.
And they don't
Okay.
care about the value of
Because
education.
he made it seem like so terrible. What, like, I just like summarized what he was saying.
Oh yeah, we're not
Yeah,
saying
I
yeah.
know.
You definitely summarized what he said, and
But
you know, yeah. Go ahead.
their culture is still important to them. It's just the dominant culture for so many, like hundreds of years at this point, has been telling them that it's not valuable. Their beliefs and their way of viewing the world is not valuable. So some of that might be internalized oppression.
Oh yeah.
And so
And
I was, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think there's also the people who might not like outwardly show that they like the word, like not use their culture, but like,
Display their
do-
culture.
yeah,
or
express their culture, like, are still a part of it, that like really do care, and they like still do different traditions that other people just might not see. And like, I've had conversations with people who like say that they're like, yes, like I am Native American, and like this is how I like do, like I have that in my everyday life, but like people don't usually see that, and so like yeah.
Yeah, well, they've been like forced to assimilate, and so for this theory to say that they don't value education and they don't value their culture, well, it's because they've been oppressed and murdered, you know, for practicing their religious beliefs or for practicing their culture, and he says that they don't like they act the same way, or they don't act. What did they say? That they do act the same way, and I would argue that a lot of involuntary minorities probably do what I would say would code switch, you know? I'm sure there's a lot of Mexican Americans who were born here or have lived here for a long time and speak perfect English at school, but then speak either Spanish or Spanglish at home, or like African Americans might, you know to speak standard American English at school, and then other places speak African American vernacular English. So I mean, it's called a theory, and this book seems really nice, so I don't know why it seems so racist. Because then also in the involuntary minorities, like the one example that it gives of secondary cultural differences, because I thought it was just confusing. I think it's a confusing theory. But then the one example that he gives of secondary cultural differences is that they might have different ways of dressing.
Oh yeah, that was the only example.
They might have different ways of dressing, and this includes wearing gang colors. And I just you couldn't have thought of a better you couldn't have thought of a different characterization of minorities.
And I remember
what about Navajos wearing turquoise?
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
I remember also talking
Thank you.
about involuntary minorities like are more likely to join gangs and things like that.